So quickly introduce myself. I'm a CEO at a IT-related company. We work in health, education, and finance. You might notice I actually have a finance one too here. So we're trying to connect basically hospitals, first responders, and the patients so that there's no delay in the system. Right now, there's lots of wait time, there's insurance payouts. That's what we're trying to mitigate as a company.
Yes, good morning. Myself, Tusar. I'm the sustainability head for Dabur India and the SAARC countries. More than 2.5 decades of experience in the field of environment, sustainability, and the plastic waste management. So at present, I'm working with Dabur India Limited, and today we are all here to discuss about this most important topic, is the health and climate change. A planet health, the Clarion call to the climate change.
So, Tusar, what's your take on the topic?
And if you see, yesterday I have learned the discussion of many people. I think this topic is very, very important if you are asking me. Today's topic is about planet, our health, and Clarion call to this climate change. One Sanskrit word is that, Vasudevam Kutumbakam. That means one planet, there is one family. When you are talking about one planet, that means this is the planet where you all are living. This is the earth. If you not protect the earth, definitely there is no other planet where you can survive. And there are different challenges in terms of climate change that we'll discuss as the process is going on. And the climate change and the health is very integral part of this session. Unless we can protect or any changes on the climate that will adversely affect to the health. So really this topic is very important, not even today. In the global scenario, this topic is very, very important. And going forward, so many years, this is one of the important topic will be discussed in the various forums. Thank you. Yeah, Sujan, I think today's topic, the main important thing I want to know, how the climate change actions is doing by different organization, you know, what about this, talking about your SDG goals, how the SDG goals is help in terms of climate change?
Most companies, I think, especially in Europe, reporting SDGs is mandatory now with their financial accounting. But the purpose for that is there's an underlying concern that the Earth is going to be unlivable if we keep basically trashing it as we are. So there's a few points that we need to think about. One is air pollution. Then there's water pollution. There is
Waste management.
Waste management. Then there's deforestation.
Yeah. Soil
and so we need a holistic approach to mitigate all these issues. And let me just kick it off with air pollution. Yeah. So there are quite a few projects globally to capture carbon emissions and other, what should I say, greenhouse gases. The brunt of the blame tends to go towards China, sadly, because they do a lot of manufacturing. But most of the R&D towards this, smog towers and CCS, is actually also being done by them. So they are working really hard to keep the air livable. They also have other issues with like yellow sand flying into East Asia. But some of these, I honestly don't think there's a solution, though it does cause a lot of health issues. Respiratory, cardiac, and then there's the high-risk people, the young children, the elderly, people with underlying medical conditions. So simple solutions would be to shift our lifestyle. So instead of taking basically a car, we could use public transport. It's way more efficient. It's less impact to the environment, smaller carbon footprint.
I think, Sujan, you are absolutely to that point. While talking about this SDGs goal, that's basically a sustainability development of goals. And where the 2012, when the Rio de Janeiro, which was signed by United Nations, that's basically on the 17 goals, what you are talking about, no poverty, zero hunger, climate change, good health, good education. So these are the work every organizations, every country has set up this to make a sustainable world. When you're talking about this, your point is sustainable. The 17 goals lies on 3 pillars. That is called ESG, is environment, social and governance. Thank you.
Also, just quickly going back to the note of changing to public transport. Public transport, obviously, it's usually fossil fuels still, regular cars also. People do say moving to EV is better. Then there's obviously a lot of debate on whether producing the batteries is actually less impactful or more impactful. There's other sources like hydrogen, but then again, producing hydrogen at the moment isn't that efficient. Some companies are moving towards green hydrogen. Eventually, it would be probably a more viable solution. It only creates steam, so just pretty much water is not a negative impact to the environment. Health-wise, there's zero carbon footprint at the end of the day if you can do that. So if you could maybe utilize something like geothermal energy or solar or wind to create hydrogen, that is where the economy is moving, but it's a rather expensive process to change from fossil fuels. So certain countries are taking a kind of a backseat. 2030, 2035, some countries 2050, but generally speaking, everyone on Earth has a goal in mind. By some year, they plan on kind of making things green and clean. I know you specialize in water pollution, so maybe how about your take on water and plastics?
Yeah. So while we're talking about this climate change, so talking about the climate change, basic of 4 things. That's related to water pollution. Second is related to air pollution. Third is related to waste management. And fourth is related to reduction of the carbon footprint. Out of the 4, the one important point which is being very much helpful to this climate change is called water pollution. You know, water is a natural resource. In many countries, people are not getting water for drink a bottle. For drinking of a bottle, they have to pay like certain dollars. Where many countries, people are wasting of water. And while we are talking about these SDGs goals, that's when every country have every equality, there is no poverty and no hunger. We should not think that one country is having more of water and another country is having no water. And today, and in a very future, it will going to happen. In a petrol pump, you will get water. One bottle of water, you will have to pay a lot. Where today you have to pay for this petrol. The things is that if you don't natural sources of water to conserve, and while your conservation of water, that's 3 approaches to be adopted in all natural things. One is reduce, recycle, and reuse. So many countries have adopted these things, and being a sustainable person, and I am heading this in India, you know, the major initiatives has been taken by conservation of rainwater harvesting, by making within this industry premises and the society premises. And government is helping to that to make more and more recharge ponds also. And reusing of water. Whatever the treated water is for the coming out from these your productions, after treating, they are using that for agricultural, for gardening purpose. And many area people use it as a drinking purpose. That means recycling of water. Same water is recycling into the garden, washing and other purposes area, so that the natural withdrawal of the natural withdrawal should be minimization. Similarly, the conservation of water in various sources, and many of the area, if you see in different parts of the world, people are getting water and have to travel a longer distance. So water plays an important role, and without water, that a lot of diseases is happening. So if we'll discuss about water, it is all the key important factor in the climate change. Sujan, topping back to this, how the climate change, one of the important factor is deforestation. Do you think that how deforestation plays an important role in the climate change?
Definitely. So obviously our forests are natural filters. It goes through the roots, the soil, and keeps our water quality higher. I think the EPA published a report in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, that deforestation in US, in urban areas, is also affecting the plumbing. So definitely, actual forests where there's lots of abundant water, maybe South America, certain areas that are not desert yet, that has a huge impact. And the other major thing is probably if you don't have forests, natural habitats of animals get destroyed, and insects and animals would move into more populous human areas. They can carry a lot of interesting disease that you might not get if you hadn't cut down those forests. Quick examples, SARS, avian flu, swine flu, those all come from animals. Obviously, some of that is farming animals, but if we can keep a safe distance, we don't need to have them in our residential areas. I think Middle East also had, what was it, MERS, if I'm not mistaken, a couple years ago, or almost a decade now. I forgot about COVID, but then there's obviously mosquito-related things like malaria, which is still rampant in certain parts of the world. There's dengue fever. All these things could be avoided if we actually just keep our forests intact. Of course, there's a cost factor and there are other factors involved, but honestly speaking, we need to protect our natural resources, and forests are helping us keep our water and lumber, which is also another natural resource, plentiful. So we need to protect it for our own health.
In addition to Sujan's points, you are absolutely right. When you're talking about this climate change and greenhouse gases, there are 4 things which contributing your greenhouse gases. The major contribution is your carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbons. So the emissions of carbons into more and more atmosphere, that is depletion of the ozone layers. And the major climate changing is due to the carbon emission. Because of the deforestation, where naturally the CO2 is conserved in the jungles and forests, and about the deforestation, the carbon percentage will be high on the environment. And it will not help us in carbon emission, that's climatic change. So to eco-balance the entire thing, whatever the emission is polluted from the industry and the transport, the same amount to be balanced if you are doing the afforestation rather for a deforestation. I think correct.
Sorry, I prepared the questions for him, so give me a second. Okay, so then what about the waste, especially in plastics? We mentioned it earlier. How does that negatively or positively impact climate change?
Like we discussed about air and you discussed about water, there is another important thing, it is called waste management, the plastic waste management, you know. That is across the globe, everybody is trying to reduction of the virgin plastics. And this waste, if we will not do it in a sustainable way, that is also impacting to the water body. At present, today global scenario, whatever the waste is coming out from different segments, only 20% is recycling and rest of the 80% is going to the landfill. While the waste is going to the landfill, that means, you know, one of these waste is plastic waste. It is non-biodegradable. When it is going to the landfill, for more than thousands of years, it cannot degrade. So it will affect to the water body, and this water body where people are used to drink this water will infect more and more diseases, cancers and other diseases. So properly sustainable management of the waste management and the plastic is one of the important thing. Today in every scenario, every conference I used to attend, many conferences in a year. If you're talking about in India and the global also, people are talking more about plastic. Similarly, plastic also, 3R approach is adopted. Reduce, recycle and recycle plastics contain. So more and more reduction of the virgin plastic and recycled plastic will come into picture. Recently, you can see in the Coca-Cola company has made a 100% recycled plastic bottle. That means drinking water bottle which you are using now with the virgin plastic, is no more. After some years, it will be the recycled plastic bottles. When it will be more and more recycled, the virgin plastic will reduce. Once the virgin plastic will reduce, the carbon footprint is reduced. And the carbon footprint, which is a major contribution in the climatic change, that will also major impact if you do that in a sustainable way. India has done many progressively things in terms of plastic waste management, reuse of the plastic content, recycling of the plastic content. And I am driving this project for the last 5 years and helping not only to, as a company, is not only helping to my company and to helping many other companies to do and the sustainable waste management. And I can give an example. One classic thing, it is not only of a compliance. In my areas where I'm residing at Delhi, I'm doing a mass awareness campaign. It's called My 10 kg campaign. In the My 10 kg campaign, I'm insisting people and covering up more than 250 to 300 societies where waste is collected and segregated into dry and wet waste. The waste cannot be recycled properly unless it is be segregated in waste into dry. The major problem, if you are asking about India, and many of the countries also, the plastic is not recycled properly because it has a mixed waste. And I think you are from Japan. Japan is the one country I know. The source segregation is 100% is there. So if the source segregation is there, for that people need awareness and educations. More and more segregation of dry and waste, which can convert it into the plastic for recycling and go for co-processing and the cement industries. That's basically plays and keys an important role in waste management. Sujan, what are the government policies to make this climate change? Do you highlight some of the points, government policies?
In terms of health?
Yeah.
Quite a few, I think most of the world, I already mentioned it quickly, have some targets, mostly health-driven. But there's a huge financial aspect to go carbon neutral by 2035, I'd like to say. Like I said, some of them are 30, some of them 40, some of them 50. But within the next 20, 30 years, most countries are trying to go carbon neutral. That's obviously hard regulation. There's some softer regulations where companies are trying to make their own process like lead to have a building that's maybe self-sufficient. They have solar panels on the top. Maybe they've invested in wind turbines. But generally speaking, I think there's a somewhat of a disconnect between people who fund it, so basically the taxpayers, so us, and then the government bodies that are driving it, because obviously the government needs tax money to actually put these policies in practice. And they do understand that there's a need to do it from health and livability and so many other factors, but to change infrastructure is a very, very costly ordeal. And it's easy to just throw out and say, let's just shift from fossil fuels, like let's just ban, like what UK said, we'll just ban all fossil fuel running cars. But then there's the actual fact that people would have to adopt EVs or some other cars, maybe like Nordic countries maybe use bicycles or more public transport. But as a whole, as a society, we need to move towards this goal because the government policy is there, but then there's the reality of actually funding it, paying for it, which I would say it would be a struggle going forward because it's going to be pinching our wallets.
Yes, in addition to Sujan's points, we are talking about your climate change. We are talking about these government policies. If you know, one statistics data shows that carbon is the major contributor for this climate change. And it is from a data shows that by 2035, world's 80% vehicles will be electric vehicles. Because the carbon emission is majorly coming out from transportation. You know what percent is coming? 78% carbon emission is for transportation. And 16% is coming from the agricultural sectors. And 5% is coming from the industry. So wherever the principle of major carbon contribution is for transport sector, so every country, every government is mostly focusing on the electric vehicles. And one classic example I can show you, by 2030, 2020, the sold of electric vehicle was around 16.5 million as compared to 2021. So in India also the electric vehicle percentage in 2019 it was 0.19%, and by the end of 2022 is 4%. The way it is increasing, we have taken a massive target by 2030, India more than 80%, if this rate will continue, the momentum will continue, by 2030, India more than 80% vehicle will be electric vehicle, because that is the major contribution which is generating the emission in the greenhouse gases. Because electric vehicle, when you asking about this climatic change, everything should be economically balanced. Whether suppose you are going for electric vehicles rather from a diesel vehicle or a petrol vehicle, electric vehicle. Okay, one way you are reducing the carbon emission without using the petrol and diesel. But other way, from the electric vehicle, your charging station is there. The charging station, you are getting electricity from where? It's again grid. When you are using the grid electricity, that can again generating carbon emission. For that, government is again coming back with the renewable energy sources. So would you like to talk about some renewable energy sources?
This is definitely something that's very important, and I think I did briefly mention something about green hydrogen. So quite a few countries are trying to repurpose old pipelines. They used to transport oil or maybe LPG, LNG, some kind of gas. They're trying to repurpose those so that they can transport high purity hydrogen gas. Obviously, I'm harping on hydrogen because it's one of my favorite sources of energy. It's very clean. And producing that, if you can access maybe geothermal, would be literally, it's called green hydrogen. It is very clean. It only produces steam, no health impacts whatsoever. And yeah, but like I said, to revamp the infrastructure is very hard. That's one thing. And then right now, we're using solid-state batteries to store the energy. So there's cobalt and lots of heavy metals. To source these materials to make batteries to store electric energy is not the most efficient in terms of carbon footprint. We are using a lot of heavy vehicles to actually source what we need to change the whole process. So obviously for the next couple of years, this whole conversion process is going to be eating away at this goal, but obviously it's not a short-term goal, it's a long-term commitment by, I think, all the companies and governments in the world. So going forward, we should see greener pastures, so to speak. Like I said, there's wind, there's solar, there's geothermal, which not many countries have tapped. Lots of European countries recycle food waste and stuff like that, which does become less methane producing energy sources. There's methanol related energy sources. These are so much cleaner. And like I said, there's less health implications because there are no heavy gases that are being produced in the consumption of these energy sources.
And you are rightly said, in addition to your point, if you see how these countries have gradually been improved. If you see just 10, 15 years back, people are using diesel car. Still, many of the countries is still using diesel car. Then initiative petrol car. Then go to CNG vehicle, and now people are thinking and also doing the electric vehicle. So while talking about the electric vehicle, one way a reduction of carbon footprint is decreased, but similar way, the renewable energy part also government is working in the various countries also. How to do the renewable sources. So renewable energy, while you eating from the grid and renewable energy, the major, again, one important factor is that the panel which is coming out from this, which has a life of around 10 to 15 years. After that, where the solar panel will go? Again, recycling of the solar panel is another cause. Unless you have to balance all the things, it will make a major impact on the climatic change. Similarly, the battery vehicle. The battery vehicle is running at the road, and it's a global estimation is that by 2035, more than 80% vehicle will be electric vehicle. But whereas the battery will goes out, again the question is coming out how the recycling of the batteries. If you will not do the proper recycling of these batteries, again it will have a major impact on the climatic change. Either it is going to the landfill or somewhere else. So whenever we have to plan something, whether it's equipment or a design or a services, anything, that has to be balanced. Because nowadays when you are talking about the investors, is looking at a company not on the cost perspective. If the company, how sustainable is that company, how sustainable product they are using, how much water they are consuming in the less water is consuming in the water, how much less energy they are consuming on that product. That is the main important aspect which is looking after by investor as in today's scenario. And that's why the climate change and ESG is come into a picture. That is the most important thing, your water, again is your renewable energy, then is your waste management, then is your air pollution. These are the key factors which are affecting this climate change. Another factor, Sujan,
Just to quickly jump in, on his point, so I think urban planning is very, very important. Obviously, the MENA region is pretty good at this, or maybe I should say very good at this. And so basically, you can have nice trees, you can plan the whole city so that it's green. A green city tends to lower temperatures, there's less health implications. I can give you a simple example. After World War II, obviously Japan was pretty burnt out. I live in Japan. So they planted certain trees to recreate forests. Unfortunately, those trees, their planning was kind of not to point. There's a lot of hay fever, lots of pollen. They didn't quite take into fact that it's a volcanic island, so the trees are basically very happy. So even these small, small facts affect human health. So urban planning, so like I said, we need parks, we need forested areas. This would greatly, greatly mitigate this car pollution factor, at least until cars fully swap over to a cleaner source of energy.
And what are the, because you know we are discussing on the waterfront, on the renewable energy, waste management, how energy play an important role in the emission of this climate change. Do you think that it's an important factor? Is the energy, reductions of energy also? Can you highlight some points?
Definitely. So I keep going back to energy, sorry. Fossil fuels, that's our go-to right now. Whether we're creating electricity for EVs or charging stations, it's still basically we're burning either coal or we're burning petroleum. And definitely it's still plentiful at the moment, but it's not the cleanest. It has a lot of negative impacts on the environment, which also connect directly to health risks. Renewable energy sources they're plentiful, but back again to the fact that the infrastructure cost to fully shift to a truly sustainable and green energy infrastructure is, honestly speaking, unaffordable for some countries. So I think it should be a global effort where countries that have the resources, I wouldn't say share, but help, lend a helping hand. And there are quite a few developing nations. Those nations still have the opportunity to start off being green because they haven't fully deployed their infrastructure. So I think certain parts, even where we're from India, certain parts of Africa, the infrastructure is still lacking. So if you could kind of share resources in that way and the know-how for the so-called developed nations, if we could work together and collaborate, we could definitely speed up this process. Instead of it being just like a nation kind of thing, I know EU works together generally, but there are quite a few Caribbean nations, African nations that could help, could be helped if some of the wealthier countries gave them the experience, gave them the funds, worked together and develop better energy resources, better infrastructure for energy management. And yeah, we move together.
Yeah, so addition to this point, just highlight one or two more points. While you're talking about this energy, you should know what exactly we are talking and how it can be mitigated. That should be both be coincide. Like today, we all are sitting in the conference room, big conference is going on, hotels is there. So a lot of energy, the AC gases which are used, whether it is a ozone friendly or not. That we have to take out while we are taking collective decisions across the country, across the nation, across the industry. That is also important factor. Now, the the replacement of the AC gases, you know commonly R32, which is a friendly ozone friendly gases, and R134A, which is used. Before to that, whichever gas is used is not ozone friendly. Similarly, the rise in temperature on the atmosphere, if you see 15-20 years back, the outside temperature, and today as in scenario, the temperature, why it is rising? Because I can give you an example. By 2030, it is expected that the global temperature will be rise 1 to 1.5 degree. When you are talking about 1 to 1.5 degree, that is very high. One way, we are working on climatic change by adopting certain technologies, certain method, and other way, it will be 1 to 1.5 degree rise. And what will happen if it will rise to 1 to 1.5 degree? That is a huge temperature will rise, the water level will goes up, and many of the countries will be buried under the water. So this is not the SDG goal. SDG goal is that equality, equal food, equal hygiene, no poverty, no hunger. So as a country, when you are talking about planet, that means one family. How every country, every organizations, every people be in safe and make a balance between these amenities and the climate, it has to be balanced. Because everything has a cost to an action. When you are doing something, we see that what will the consequences of that action. Unless if you don't think about these consequences, maybe the environment is such a things which will give you a bounce back in the future. Now we can see, today we are sitting at a temperature, it's outside of our home also, 22 degree, 20 degree of AC temperature. No, this is not at all a good sign, because the environmental impact outside is going increasing. So as a organizations, we have to thought that people, those who are working on the various experts from various fields, from a technology side, from a other sides, educations and consultants, we could think some betterment how to make an environment. Sujan, that one point is coming to mind, like during COVID, there is a lot of things has been happened. Do you think that how the climatic change plays an important role in mental health? That is also important part. Can you elaborate something?
It might be a stretch, but we could make the connection that climate change was a potential driving factor for the spread of COVID. But I think it's more about human tendencies or practices. For example, in East Asia, people usually wear a mask just to prevent the general flu, the regular flu, which wasn't so common in other countries. So, and certain people react differently, certain cultures, societies. So I don't know whether it's so much of a mental health issue. I think it's more about habitual tendencies and maybe general awareness. I think not everybody admits or acknowledges that there is a shift in the climate, which is weird, because I remember when I was in elementary school, we didn't have an air conditioner at school. I remember it being livable, quite fine. And now, I mean, I need this 20 degrees, honestly. It's much, much warmer, and I don't even remember my country, India, being that scorchingly hot during midday. So I'm pretty sure if we look at it just 10 or maybe 15 years, there's a huge difference in the actual climate. And weather is pretty extreme. I don't remember typhoons in Japan where I live. They weren't this extreme. Like, we didn't have golf courses falling down. So I think weather on a whole has shifted to be quite extreme. So like winters are really cold and summers are really hot. So I don't know whether I can actually connect it to the mental side, but being at home during COVID, that if we can extend it to the point and say that the weather was a factor that contributed to spreading COVID, we could say that people were, stuck at home, isolated, because it's like a real stretch, though.
I think, Susan, you are right. If you see this mental health also very much affecting to this, because when you're talking about more rise in temperature, more cold, these are also very much interrelated to this climatic change. When you are talking about more temperature, there are biodiversity. Lot of species is there, lots of plants is there, lots of animals is there. And if you will not take care of this biodiversity, You know, one thing's, those who are a major reduction factor for CO2 carbon dioxides, if your certain temperature rise and certain temperature go, many of the plants, many of the species will be over from this world. And that which is major reduction for this carbon footprint or the emission of intensity, that we have to take care of the biodiversity. When you are talking about different factors, whether it's a biodiversity, whether it's a mental health, whether it's a water pollution, it's a air pollution, rise in temperature high, we're talking about renewable energy, reduction of carbon footprint, and also, coming back to that point, how afforestation is important. If you see, we are think that today also we are feeling very, very hot. And you think that after 10 years, the temperature will be rise to 1 to 1.5 degree. By the way, if you see if deforestation occur, I am giving an example if I am remembered, 2019, it is around 94,000 kilometers jungle has been destroyed in Australia. If you see in the Google, 94,000 kilometers, you know, deforestation of the jungle in any of the, if you see in the TV, many of the countries having huge fire. That means the carbon footprint is again rise in temperature. You are taking certain measures, certain things to reduce the carbon effect. Otherwise, deforestation or fire in jungle will increase the temperature. So how to make the balance in the things? This is the very, very important topic. If we'll discuss this topic, I think entire day, because you know, I am passionate for these subjects and discussing many conferences in the last 1.5 years. This is my more than 55 conferences talking on sustainability and waste, because this is going to be a very, very important thing in the coming future. So you are, I think from your, I know your background from the finance also. Do you think that the climate change make an impact on financial impact on the climate change?
I think the major driver for businesses and governments around the world would be climate change, especially for countries that don't move quickly. The longer you wait, the more expensive, the more costly it's going to be to start late, because then you'll be playing a game to catch up with the rest of the world. And that is usually not a prudent financial decision to make. So the countries that have started the ball rolling earlier are definitely on the right track. But again, like I said, not every country can get on the bandwagon yet. So we should work as a whole, like you mentioned. Everyone has to be pointed in the same direction for this to actually succeed. We can't have 1 or 2 countries being, you know, like, nah, we'll just wait, we'll just see what you guys are doing. That's really not how this is going to work. Maybe for more detailed questions, we can take it out, because we won't have time for Q&A. So you want to say some wrapping remarks?
I think almost we have covered on all aspects, whether it's your water, air, water, your financial impact, mental health, decarbonization, deforestation, biodiversity. So these are the important topics which relate to that today's topic of our planet and health is a climate actions. So being in one family and one planet, we think that how my country, my organization will improve. Similar way, how to help others, those who are not that much of technologically advanced or in terms of economically advanced. We should help other nations so that we can say this is one planet and we love everything in equality. I think we have covered all the points. I think now this is the time. Any questions from side, so we will love to answer that question.
Mic is way higher than.
Good morning. I'm Tarima Matin. I'm a consultant radiologist and associate medical director at NHS England. I think an area that we've sort of maybe haven't covered is around sustainable food. So I think on an individual basis, the biggest thing that maybe I can do, I do love eating meat, but to move towards a whole food, locally sourced, vegetable-based diet. I think there's a lot that we can do, and actually perhaps governments or people that write policy could nudge lots of people in or communities in that right direction. There are a lot of incentives that maybe are against that, around agriculture or the farming industry and meat, and I'm interested in your thoughts around how can we promote a sustainable food diet across the global community.
Thank you for the question. Again, I think it goes back to the whole awareness and people's habits. If we don't change our habits, that is... I'm also a non-vegetarian. I don't like salad. I prefer my steak. I know, I'm honest. But agri-tech, the whole farming industry, it's moving forward at a rapid pace to prevent, what should I say? Obviously, cows are one of the largest sources of, I think, methane, which is another greenhouse gas. So there are a lot of companies doing R&D to create meat replacements, those vegetable-sourced, protein-sourced, like bean-based meats. At some point, I agree, we would have to shift. But, I mean, human tendency, we don't like change, entropy-wise. We like to we're satisfied with what we're doing right now. So unless there's more, I don't want to say vegan or vegetarian, but people who are open-minded about changing their human habits, even if the industry changes, I mean, it's not even, the cost still doesn't even make sense as far as I'm concerned, but.
So I agree with what you're saying. Just, I guess, a couple of kind of feedback. So with these vegan, a lot of them are they're heavily processed and actually very bad nutritionally. And I think if we look to our experience during the pandemic, most governments were able to influence entire countries to stay at home, to not, to wear masks, to not interact with each other. In the UK, we're allowed half an hour to go out for kind of a run or a walk every day. So I believe there's a lot more that we could do to actually influence people. But what I think is there are a lot of negative kind of influences in terms of incentives and finance from kind of meat companies or farming industry.
I think this is right. Also, if you see this, we're talking for the conversation about the SDGs goal. The SDGs goal is talking about good food and good health is one of the two important goals which is signed in the United Nations. So while you're talking about good food and good health, that must be balanced, whether you are a vegetarian, non-vegetarian, where the protein source is more, where carbohydrates more, that. So meant to be equilibrium balance of diet, because health is related to climate and climate is health. So both are very, very integral part. So as a take, which is better, and as a individuals, as a experts also, we should do what is do better first, applied with yourself, then with others, then with country, then with the world.
Just a quick note. You did say, and there are quite a few countries that put their foot down for the EV, like no more. So I guess a country could do that. But quick example, when the US, please don't overreact when I say US, when the US did the alcohol ban, people started bootlegging it. So certain things might need to be done gradually over time, but we definitely should move towards that direction. I wholeheartedly agree with what you said, yeah. Thanks for that question.
1 minute left, please.
Good morning. I'm Shafia from India. I have been listening to this topic for quite a long time, and we have not spoken anything about food and soil health, because a lot of the countries still they are using urea to cultivate, to do agricultural based products. And these food, when we eat, eat for a longer period of time, your intestine and your stomach gets contagious, and it can leads to a cancer kind of thing. And we are all focusing on the good health, but when the food, what we eat today, is not that quality of a food, then we are not talking anything about the food and the soil. So any inputs on that and how the government has to come forward to help these, to keep the system clean, not only water pollution, and the food is also an important part of the human beings. Thank you.
And thank you for the question. Definitely heavy metals in the soil, mercury, there's also microplastics. This is an issue that quite a few agri-tech companies are working on. They're actually thinking of, there are a few projects that are doing R&D to create bacteria that eat plastic, that consume heavy metals, so that it's basically healthier food sources, especially for vegetable produce. But I think, again, it's a long-term commitment. It's not going to be like today, tomorrow.
And it's organic food? Can
Yes,
definitely...
it's organic, non-chemical, no pesticides, but, I mean, bacteria, so we can wash it off.
Addition to Sujan's points and your question, just add 2 lines I will sum up. Like good food. When you are talking about, again, good food, I correlate many things. How will good food? Because I taste 16% of carbon emission from agriculture. And how the agriculture is coming out, you are using different kind of pesticides. And in the pesticide, more of a nitrogen is there, which is, percentage is very high, which is not good for health. Similarly, good food, good life, good health, that's a very, very long journey. We have to think how, because I cannot survive without vegetables. So that doesn't mean that I cannot buy vegetables from the market. It's impossible. But if you're going to make the vegetables, you made up pesticides and sell. And the water used in the vegetables is coming from polluting industries' water also. So these are all very correlated things. So that's why it's called Clarion to the climate change. So Ajay, this topic, I think this topic will going to be an agenda for the next 50 years. And this is not a small thing. Hope the topic will be a very interesting topic. I think time is already done. We are here for the entire day. We can discuss more things. Thank you, Sujan.
Thank you, Tusar.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was very interesting. Thank you, Ms., for bringing up the sustainability issue. Yes, it is a long-term process. Thank you.
Thank you.